Okay, so today I get the opportunity to talk to Rana Salman, author, MBA, PhD, and I'm going to get her to explain a little bit about herself and background. But I just want to share my first interaction with Rana with everyone out there listening. Now she's worried. We were actually in Bali, but it was a work meeting, and I was working for the startup AirWatch, had been taken over by VMware. We're now doing training to all the salespeople, and I had to present. And here comes bowling in was this Rana Salman to teach me how to do presentations. So in the start of her book, which we're going to get to, she talks about, I'm going to give it to you straight. I'm going to tell you what to do and what not to do, right? And that's exactly you, right? Because I went, whoa, right? And no, Rob, you got to do this, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. So that was my introduction to you. And of course, we've kept in touch, and it's a great pleasure to speak to you today. So welcome, Rana Salman.
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to reconnect, to re-engage. I have such great respect for you. Every time I meet with you, there's something that I learned. So I'm looking forward to also learning something from you today as I have my notes ready to take notes and my pen. So let's get going.
Sounds good. So, Rana, do you want to please just give us a bit of your background? You know, I mentioned MBA, PhD. You've started your own company. You're involved with some tech groups and stuff like that. So please give us a bit of your background.
So I'm like you, I love to learn. I'm always curious to learn more and more and more. And so um, ever since I was young, I loved to research. And so in my 20s, after I got my undergrad, I decided, hey, there's more to learn. So let me get my MBA. And I got it in marketing and brand management. And it really opened my eyes about the importance of customer centricity that served me well when I got into sales. Before the age of 30, I was more curious. I wanted to do more research and I wanted to help change the world. And so I decided, hey, let's go get my PhD and let's learn more about how to conduct proper research, how to do some analysis. And I did that. But when you go to school for a long time, Rob, you kind of you have debt. And so I needed to work, real work. And so I decided I took a consulting course during my journey, and I was kind of intrigued by the world of consulting. So I applied for a job in consulting and ended up by accident being sales consulting. I got in and I fell in love with sales enablement and also sales itself, because there's a lot of discipline when you're trying, as you know, you've been doing it for a while too, with B2B enterprise deals. There is psychology, there is finance and business acumen, there is the ability, the ethics and the responsibility, the how do you influence the persuasion of it. It really made me see how complex selling is. And I just I fell in love with it, and I did it and kept doing it. And close to 20 years later, I'm still in it. I've sold in IT and I've sold in higher ed, in healthcare, in nonprofit. And then in my mid 30s, I was like, okay, well, let me try be on my own. I come from an immigrant family, small business owners. So I've seen the hustle, I've seen the good and the great, but also how hard it is. So it took me a while to recognize, do I want to go into this world? And man, I went into that world, and it has been an amazing experience filled with a lot of lessons, as well as a lot of creativity and a lot of empowerment and autonomy to really do what I love, and also work with my customers to do the right thing.
And that's where we met too, because you're doing training and coaching and directing us for all of our sales training. So what are you doing now? You're doing the hustle, you're doing your business. So
Yes.
what you're actually doing now?
Yeah, so what we're doing is I partner with organizations to help elevate their sales organization's performance. So what does that mean? Sometimes you go in an organization and they want help in their sales enablement strategy. So I work with them in understanding, well, what's working, what's not, what are we missing, and how can we create that strategy? But some organizations, I come in and they have an amazing strategy where they want me is to execute. And that's where that content, the tools and the training comes in. And that's where you'll see me actually create these training programs and execute and help with the coaching aspect of it. I think you and I have a lot in common. And one of the things we do is we meet our customers where they're at, right? And that's what I do, where my customers are at. And usually they're hyper growth to large IT organizations. And I meet them where their needs are at. And also, I'm very particular in qualifying in and qualifying out quickly. It's really important that if we're not a good fit, that we part ways as good, as good colleagues, as professionals, so that way we're not wasting each other's
time. I remember a boss once saying that there's no degree in sales. You can't go to college to do a degree in sales. So what are you finding out there in terms of, when it is a fit? And I like what you just said in terms when it's not a fit, it's time to walk away. And you're right about that in the book as well. But sometimes, and especially from above, no, you must keep going, you must keep going. And it's heartache for both customer and yourself. But what are the actual needs you're finding out there that when you go into these companies, that what do they actually need help in?
Yeah, I think it depends where the organization is at, right? If they, one of the common things though is, and that's kind of the challenge with organizations, is lead generation, right? How are we continuously building our pipeline? What are we doing to build our pipeline? How are we adapting to our customers' shifting needs? How are we leveraging, for example, social selling? How are we now shifting from being in person now to more of the hybrid approach, where most of our sales conversations, even with enterprise complex deals, are happening remotely? And so we're seeing that change. How are we going or are using generative AI and not using losing the human connection? So those are conversations that are happening within organizations. Time, like I just had a conversation with CROs at the sales enablement conference where I was a keynote, and I brought in some amazing chief revenue officers and sales officers. And time is their biggest challenge, right? How can we manage our time? How can we teach our salespeople to manage their time effectively? How can we be more productive with the little time we have? So those are some conversations that are happening.
So what did you tell them? How can they manage their time?
I think it starts with first line sales managers, right? It's really understanding how are we enabling first line sales managers to coach to these best practices, but also how are we teaching our reps at the same time on the essentials. And that's where the fundamentals like time management, like having preparing for these conversations, like showing up to your meetings, like conducting a business level conversations, like connecting to that human, actively listening, communicating effectively, tailoring your communications. So really what I'm working with organizations on is, guys, we got to go back and talk about the fundamentals of influencing a behavior, because at the end of the day, you and I know that in B2B complex enterprise deals, people are buy from people. Machines are not making decisions. And to sell is to influence, and to influence is to have empathy and to really put yourself in the other person's shoes, not only see the world through their eyes, but actually feel what they're going through, and then design a solution, be compassionate and design a solution that will solve a problem. And that's where we got to go back to, how can I connect at a human level?
So you actually start your book in I'll hold it up again, Sales Essentials. You start your book with a story about you and your dad. And one of the first sell jobs I think you did was convinced him to take a 9-year-old on a sales call. And I think from the book you wanted to go to the beach, but let's not go there. But what your dad demonstrated to you that day was the human connection, right? And you say that's the heart of every sale. And the quote I really like is that you've got to shift from the internal focus of winning the deal to an external focus of helping the customer be successful. And you say that's counterintuitive. I'll pause there. So tell me about this shifting from internal to external, from winning the deal to this, helping make the customer successful. How do you talk to people about that?
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about winning the deal, you're thinking about my product, my price, my deal. It's all my, I. When you shift it to they, wow, they have a problem that if I have the empathy, that I feel them, that I can help them. But to do that, I have to understand their world. It's in any relationship, personal or professional. If you focus on you, you turn people off. People are not interested in how great you are. They're interested in, hey, do you care about me? And how can you help me? How can you genuinely help me? And to do that as a sales rep, I have to do my homework. I have to look at your LinkedIn and connect with you and understand, well, what is their background? What really moves them? What inspires them? What are some of their KPIs? If you're a public company, I need to look at your earnings call transcript and really understand, well, what's going on strategically with that company, and how does that connect to this buyer persona, to really come in with a conversation about you, turning it about you. When I do that, the human's going to see, the person sees that this person has the intent and the motives to help me. It's not about their numbers. They're not faking it and trying to just come in, close that deal and get out. And that also may take a longer time, because you're doing multiple discoveries to understand, to uncover, to validate, to research, to also have a business level conversation with not just one person, because it usually takes in a complex deal about 6 to 8 decision makers.
I can remember in my 20s as a young sales rep going in to see a CIO. And I was working for IBM at the time. And back in those days, you could get into most doors, because you work for IBM. And I used the line, how can I help you in your business? And he said, if you don't effing know how to F, and he's swearing at me, F and this and F and that, how to help me, then you need to go and find out and then come back and all that sort of stuff. And of course, I was a bit shell-shocked, but it taught me a lesson that I've never forgotten, that I understand the customer, understand the business, etc. You mentioned before time, right? None of us have enough time, right? We haven't worked out, quantum physics hasn't worked out how to put 28 hours into a day or whatever. And we seem to be heading the opposite way to what you just said. We seem to be putting in these, automatic robocalling systems. We seem to be, you're going through your review meetings of your pipeline and all that sort of stuff. We seem to have more and more this internal focus of how can we be more efficient, not effective, like what you're talking about. Is that what you're coming across when you're working with your customers?
So what I'm seeing is that organizations that are doing it right are the ones that are really focusing on integrating their technology, using sales automation for efficiencies, and really focusing on developing their sales people to be more strategic, to understand the business, to use insights and data to inform their decisions. To follow formal sales processes and hold their reps accountable to it, and have the coaching of that first line sales managers. Those organizations, you see their performance, you see a correlation with that behavior and those systems in place to their performance. But then you see other organizations, because we are so focused on quarter by quarter, right? There is a level of tactical thinking. I gotta get this done. I gotta keep them going. And we sometimes move away from that strategic thinking, and from also making sure that everything is kind of put together to that seamless customer experience. This is really important. It's not just when I started selling AE, ISR, AISR, AE, bring the SE, and then we sell it and we hand it over and we're done. Well, with SaaS and with all of what we're selling, it doesn't go that way. Now your post sale becomes really important, because that's where you're going to make your money, is in your upsell, cross sell, and renewal. And so that seamless customer experience becomes really, really important. And organizations that are taking all that, holistically looking at that, they're the ones that will outperform or are outperforming right now.
You're singing my tune, right? But I see these handoffs in organizations. I saw an ad on LinkedIn, and it was a video, and it was about you know, as a sales rep, you're not alone. Before you even talk to it, there's an inside sales rep spoken to the customer, then they hand it to you, then you hand it to a solution salesperson, and they might have multiple of those around the different areas of their products, etc. And now the customer's got 5 people sitting in front of them. So we're seeing more, and then they hand it over to implementation or delivery, and then they hand it over to support. And suddenly we now see customer success coming along. Why? Because no one did the setting up what was needed in the first place, then implementation, then support, etc., etc. I'm ranting, I'm sorry, but are you seeing that out there?
Yes, of course. And I had I have stories about, you have this customer that's been around with organizations for a long time, and you have an AE calling as if they don't know the history of the account, but this account has been with an organization for many, many years. And that the buyer is thinking, wow, I'm not that important enough for you all to look at the CRM and to understand that I've been with you for that long. And now you have someone calling me, acting like I'm prospecting into this account as if they don't know any of its history. That handoff, that seamless experience is so important. Our customers, they want to know that we understand them. Especially our customers, we understand them. Anyone that calls is a representation of our company, and to the customer, we should know everything about them and about the business that we do with them and how satisfied they are with us and what are their challenges, and all of that should be seamless. Is it hard to implement? Yeah, it is hard to implement.
It shouldn't be that hard to implement, but it seems to be. But we'll come back to that.
Yes, I want to hear.
I remember a call I did on the chief operating officer of a bank, my first call on this bank, and I got briefed by my team, this and this and this and all that sort of stuff. And I went in there, and the guy started hitting me about this problem they had. And I'm going, no one briefed me on this. No one briefed me on what's going on. And apparently it was from 2 years earlier, and it had been resolved, but he was pushing me. And then halfway through, he gave me a book about consolidative selling. And I said, well, I'm actually trying to do that now. So how am I going? How are you rating me on this sales call? And that kind of pulled him up short. And he went, oh, you're not doing too bad, actually. And then from then on, we had a great relationship. And I went back and said, what the hell is this issue? And that was resolved 2 years ago. Anyway, it is important on that. And there's so much information, not just internally, but also publicly. You talked about before, earnings calls, and just going to people's websites and, looking at, well, this is what we're about, and here's who our people are and stuff like that. So I agree with that.
It's not negotiable, right, Rob? Like discovery is a gift. When you land a meeting with an executive, a sales meeting, that is a gift in itself. And it is expected of us to have done our homework. Now, efficiently, right? The word efficiently, how do we do it efficiently? And that's where, understanding our buyer personas, working with marketing to understand who we're targeting, what is our value proposition, and then you customize it to that human and to their business.
Sorry, I'm telling too many stories here, but the way I got that meeting was my PA rang his EA and said, we'd like to set up the meeting. And she said, well, here's what you got to do. You got to bring in a tray of vanilla slices, and I'll introduce you to all of the executive assistants, and then you can have the meeting. So that's what my PA did. And of course, that got the meeting. And then every year I would give them, I used to get the box for the Australian Tennis Open, and I'd give it to her for one of those times, and she'd invite all the EAs in from all the top customers, and I could get meetings. Of course, I couldn't waste anyone's time or anything else like that, but just a side note there. It was a great way to build relationships that you talk about. Again, in the book, you talk about this seamless customer experience. You talk about as a selling point up front. I think so many customers are used to being handed off that when you come and say, well, no, here's how we do it, that's a point of differentiation. And I like what you said about, you said it just then, but you also said it in the book about don't go dark. I'm not going anywhere, right? Customers are used to their account execs turning up when the renewal's due. They've signed an enterprise agreement. 3 years later, the rep turns up, oh, it must be 3 years, etc. What are you finding out there? What do you coach people to do in that space?
Yeah, so trust, I always say trust is a secret sauce. When there's trust and there's research around that, things get done faster, as well as it's less costly to an organization. And when you form that trust, Stephen M. R. Covey identified trust as made up of two domains. One of them is competency and one of them is character. Character is about your intent and your motives and your integrity. And competency is about results, capability, skills. When you're selling a complex deal and you develop that trust with your customers, it's hard to develop that trust just by handing it off to some other person, and you expect that other person to pick up where you left off. There's that human connection, right? And so I always tell salespeople, first of all, you got to understand what the engagement model within your organization. So you all are aligned on roles and responsibility, but you also need to be also set the stage of when are you getting engaged after the deal is closed, and what is your role and responsibility. Look, what ends up happening is that the customer, because they form this relationship with you as an account executive, they will actually tell you things that they may not tell other people. And so it's actually good for the other team members to keep integrating that sales rep for the goodness of the whole account, so we can course correct, so we can identify problems early on, so we can get that feedback from the customer if the customer feels more comfortable talking to the AE. Also, the AE needs to be close to other colleagues and enable them to listen to opportunities, right? Like, these are some activators that I want you to think of, that I want you to listen to. And if they say that, bring me in, because these are also opportunities for us to upsell, to cross-sell, to get deep into that account. I know there's a lot of resources constraints, but it's not, I don't think it's a great idea to pull that human out and say, okay, now, Mr. Customer, now you're on your own. And also, it's really important that when you're engaging these resources, that you also engage them at the right time in the sales process before the deal closes, so that they can start developing the relationship. And that you're building that trust that between those resources that are going to take over and the customer.
Again, you're singing my tune. I would always want my account execs to be involved all the way through, including, helping out in maybe some sort of like governance role with the exec sponsor as the solution's being deployed and implemented. And, they know you're with them every step of the way, because there are hiccups, there are, those sorts of things. And if you're there and you're working with the customer through those, you are building that trust, you are building that relationship as you go through. And I've seen setups where once the deal's signed, you stay on the account for 3 months, 6 months, and then we hand it over to the farmer. So this hunter-farmer model, and I'm not a big fan, but as you go through that. And you also write about
one thing that we also need to hold ourselves accountable as AEs is that we need to support these resources. We need to make sure that we're enabling them. We need to make sure that we're giving them what they need to be successful. And we also need to make sure that we are also building trust and helping them build that trust, because if they're not successful, we're not successful. This is not a competition. This is one team, one customer experience. So how can we work together to develop that seamless customer experience? I think there's accountability on both sides, right?
I think you're absolutely right, and that works both ways, because sometimes the customers think they, they've assumed a few things, and so you need to be there managing both the customer as well as your team, as well as making it all happen, so that everyone works through that. The other thing, you see certain account execs attract resource because this is what they do, what you just described. They're showing leadership, they're showing support, they're not running away, and so people want to work with them. Do you find those sorts of things happening?
So yeah, and guess what? The executives leave to another company, and the first people they call their favorite account executive that they know will be with them through thick and thin, and that will get the job done. So it's not just, you're not just doing it for this one account, you're doing it for long-term relationships. I mean, you and I have been doing this for a long time, and in that longevity it happens when you're building these strategic relationships, when you're delivering on your promise, when you're engaging the right people at the right time, and when you're doing your business with integrity, because people want to work with good people. So character becomes also important.
In your book, you touch on that, and you touch on, this is not just your career here, but it's, and I think it's in the area where you say, don't damage your own brand, right, by trying to do the wrong thing by a customer. And if you can't love your product, et cetera, then, it's time to either understand it better or to move on. So what sort of advice do you have for people who haven't been doing it for quite as long as us, but they're in early days of their career? What should they be doing to help build out their career?
Yeah, so one of the things that they need to do is they need to start using social to help add value to the conversation, and be intentional in how they create their LinkedIn profile. For example, for B2B, our number one platform for B2B selling is LinkedIn in the United States. And so how are you leveraging the social media platform that your customers are using, and how are you optimizing it and making it client facing so you're relevant to them? You also need to make sure that how you show up in the digital world is how you want to be perceived. Does it align with your professional strengths and capabilities, especially if you're new in your career? In my training, Rob, I ask reps and I tell them, folks, Google yourself, search yourself, and see what your customers is saying. Do it in incognito mode so you can see what they're seeing, because if there's something that doesn't align with your professionally how you want to be perceived, then you should be either removing it or you should be publishing new content to help push that content to the second or third page, because we know that people only, like, high percentage of people don't go past that first page of search results. So that's one thing you got to do. You also got to start being very intentional with who you're targeting. And tools like LinkedIn Sales Navigator can help you in being very, very focused on your buyer profile, on your buyer persona, the type of people that you want to go after. And then you start nurturing that relationship. And then you start sharing content that is relevant to them. So you build that brand where you're adding value and you're building familiarity. Because the more familiar a person becomes with another person, they're more likely, when you reach out to them with a compelling reason to meet, they're going to look at you as a familiar face versus a stranger, because they saw your post on LinkedIn, they saw your videos, they saw you checking their LinkedIn profile, so now they saw your face. So there's more of you're more a familiar face. So that's one aspect of it. Another thing is that you got to build your confidence, and building your confidence also starts with knowing your products. And I know we don't like to talk features and functions, and I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that if you are not confident in what you're selling, you're not going to even talk about the business conversation. You're going to stay away from even anything that has to do with that product. That's why salespeople, we go through where we're comfortable with. We may be selling legacy products because we know it really well and we're confident about it. And so knowing your product, and it's not, while your organization should be enabling you, You should take control of your destiny and you should learn about your product, about your buyers. I think we live in a day and age that we're empowered to learn and to grow and to ask questions and to listen to these recorded calls and to go into our YouTube and find customer stories. I mean, there's so much information that I would highly recommend that people take control of their destiny and how much knowledge they need to acquire to feel confident. And then another thing is, look, how you show up matter, right? Like, I love that we all want to be individuals, but when we're in front of our customers want to know that you can take care of me. You are credible. And so our attitude, our attire, our language that we use, how late we are, how early we are, how organized we are, those are all visible cues that will help someone determine, can I even give Rana the benefit of the doubt that I can trust her to give her a second meeting? So those are some things that I think we need to make sure that as an early seller that we take into as foundational, and never, 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 never just look at sales as a number. If you're only in it to make money, it's going to be painful because there's a lot of rejection and there's a lot of times that you're going to be losing. So you have to be almost like have a calling to serve people. How can I help you, right? And not like come in and not do your homework, but in your mindset thinking, I'm here to help. And yes, it's great that I'm going to make a big commission check, but if I do the right thing, I will get it.
So much in that. Let me come back through it. First, starting at the end, calling to serve people, don't be in it for money. But how many times do we hear salespeople are coin operated? I hate that phrase. Is that, do you come across that? What do you say to
Hey,
folks?
I love this. I love this profession partly also because it changes lives financially. So absolutely, there's financial reward, and you got to be motivated by that finance. But if that's your only thing that you're motivated by, you're gonna burn out, right? You have to love what you do. You have to love to serve people, and you have to also feel that you're compensated fairly, right? And so those are some. There's intrinsic motivation that keeps us, that we wake up and we want to do something, and money is included in that, but it needs to be more than just I want to make that money, I want to buy that car. It's more than that, if you want to have a long-term career in sales.
And that comes across to the team that you want to work with too. If it's just you want to buy that car, etc., etc. LinkedIn, marketing person, shout out to Sophia Pereira. She showed me how there's these tools you can run across it to say, how does your photo come across? And it goes crowdsourced, and people then rate, are you trustworthy? Are you this? Are you that? I'll put up the links in this video.
Yeah.
There's another one, Sales Navigator and some of the Salesforce tools give you around, or in LinkedIn actually, with Sales Navigator is, how does your activity rate and all those sorts of things as well. So there's some wonderful tools out there, both from LinkedIn plus third party, that you can look at to see how you are coming across, right? And I actually presented last year where trust, not data, is the new oil, right? And I put these things up of my results, and then I got sent on LinkedIn, people's sent me their results, and they beat me in these categories and stuff like that. So that was good. Knowing your product, in your book you use some great phrases and stuff. Treat your products and services as a buffet of pulling together what the customer needs to address their needs and their issues. I love that. I don't see it enough. How do you get people away from, and it could be that confidence thing you talked about, away from features, functions, bits, bytes, to this is what you need. By the way, it happens to be made up of these things, but this is what you need. How do you do that?
I think enablement plays a role, right? Like we need to enable our people on how understand the why they're not, number one, why they're not selling a solution, why they're focusing on one or two products and talking about the features and functions. It could be a skill issue that we need to address. It could be compensation issue, right? If I'm compensated on selling these products, you want me now to sell a bundle, and it's going to add friction to my sales process. Let's get real here, right? So what is preventing people from selling that solution? Is it also systems? Do we have systems that are not talking to each other? Do they not have the technology? Does the quoting, is it going to take a long time to get this done? Because look, speed is a competitive differentiator. So we have to understand the root cause of the why this is happening. Is the pricing right, right? Like sometimes, even though, sometimes we may, as salespeople, use that as an excuse. We're like, well, the pricing is too high. But we need to also make sure that we're listening to our salespeople when they bring us back the feedback, that maybe the customers are saying, well, does not do what I need it to do, or maybe I don't know how to articulate that value proposition to these buyers. So that's kind of the thing, some of the root causes of the why. And it also leadership, right? Leadership may be also, while the executives are saying something else, leadership may not be supporting that, right? And I will follow what my leaders believe in their actions, and I will model their behavior as well. So there's a lot that goes into it.
You just reminded me, when I was reading your book, these questions would pop into my mind, or these comments or thoughts, and then I'd write them down, and then next paragraph down, you just answered it, and it just happened again to me, right? Which you raised a lot of the reasons why, right? Your technology not integrated, compensation not set up, training not right, etc. And I went, well, isn't this leadership? And that's where you went, where, we need to look at this holistically, because, where if you don't have all the parts working for you, it sort of breaks down. And, I'm talking to folks now where they're saying they're trying to move into new areas like cybersecurity and stuff like that, but their salespeople have relationships with the legacy products, not where it needs to go, and the compensations are wrong. And so how do we need that? So again, you just made me smile. Just wanted to share that. I got that all the way through the book.
As if we've known each other for many years.
So, all right, last topic, and then I'll get you to wrap up and give, what you want to say to the folks in closing. But you talk about a lot, and I got to bring this quote up. You talk about internal politics, and on your internal politics is basically, it's real, it's there, get over it, right? That's not your exact quote. Here's your quote. First, accept the reality that internal politics are part of everyday business landscape. Wishing they didn't exist is wasted energy. Talk to me about what do you mean by internal politics? And then my question is, what could be achieved if we didn't have it? So start with that.
Yeah, so from my experience, I find that, internal politics is where everyone has maybe perceive that they have their own agenda. We're not thinking about the common shared goal of why we're here, why we're working in this organization, what are we all trying to achieve? What is the core purpose of this organization? Why did we even decide to work for this organization? And there's also silos, and we're all fighting for resources, and we're not communicating because sometimes we may feel that, hey, if I tell you something, you'll have an upper edge. So these are some of the things that I would define as internal politics. I found that eliminating internal politics entirely, it may be challenging, and it really often arises from complex internal personal dynamic, organizational structures, and also human nature. But as you know, and I think you're an expert in that, I'm not. However, organization can absolutely take steps to mitigate and reduce those negative effects of internal politics. And it really is also leadership making sure that they're also calling out bad toxic behavior and holding even you have sometimes you have these top performers that are behaving in a way that should not be tolerated, and they can be toxic to the team. So how are leadership involved in addressing these type of behaviors? But I know, Rob, you're an expert in that area, and I know you've done with a lot of organizations you've worked with. You did eliminate some of these internal politics. So now is my time to learn. So share with me, what are some of the kind of best practices?
So, and this is what my bookcast is all about. So I encourage everyone listening to this to go, you might actually want to start with chapter 2 and then go back to chapter 1. But I'm thinking that as I roll out the future chapters, you're going to see this come to life. But and you touched on it then when you went through it, maybe it's, it's wrong behaviors, it's not communication, it's withholding information. And a lot of that comes down to how we are structured, our organizations. And our organizations drive us to become silos, become functionally based, to become ready to hand over to the next, because that's what we're told to do. That's not how we're not measured. One of those systemic things you talked about is we're not measured on the end-to-end. We're measured on our piece. And that starts to drive the wrong behaviors. And, some of the gun salespeople are being promoted up, etc., because, well, they're hitting those specific KPIs. But if they're actually to look at the total picture, maybe it's not as rosy as it looks. And I like John Doerr's OKRs, objectives, key results, in terms of how you cascade that down. But even they have their challenges when you're inside these silos and these functional things. But a lot of the stuff you talk about in here is what we need to achieve to break down those things. But you're always battling the functional silos, battling the KPIs, battling those how I'm measured type stuff. And that's why I really like when you talk about don't go dark on your customer, stay there for the whole journey, the entire customer experience. I absolutely agree if you do that. And what I see about some of the most successful account executives is those that they do stay with the customer the entire journey, but also with the team. And I mentioned this before, that people want to keep working for them. And you said about, the executive leaves and they know they've got that skill, but that way of calling to serve people that you said before. And they say, hey, come and work with us. And of course, if you're not being supported in that, you're going to go and work for them. And so what companies don't realize, they're losing this. And I mentioned in chapter 1 about a study out of Yale called Promotion and the People Principle. And the people that get promoted above their level of competence are those good at a certain skill, sales or development or whatever. The people who actually make the better managers are more collaborative. They talk about collaborative. And you actually mentioned this in the start of the book about things like self-awareness and these sorts of things that you actually need in that. So a much bigger topic that we don't have time for to keep going, but thank you for asking that. And I absolutely agree with your response. What I've always done is, yes, internal politics are real. How do I work around that? And too many stories to go into now about how, sending chocolates to other teams and all that sort of stuff. It really helps go a long way. All right, let's wrap this up. Rana, Salman, what would you like to leave the folks with? What sort of advice, wisdom, next steps, whatever? How can they find you? I'll put up your website and everything on the video, but what would you like to leave with the folks?
Yeah, I think any of your listeners that are listening, even if they're not in a sales role, they're not even carrying a quota, we're all sellers. We're selling every day. We're selling our ideas. We're selling to our boss a budget, and we're trying to show them the value that we're going to add to help them achieve their objective. We're selling to internal audience and external audience, because the foundation of sales I've learned in my career is about influence. I'm trying to influence a behavior. And so what you'll see in the book are these foundational elements to influence a behavior, to position yourself as a credible source, to deliver the value. And that value could be your solutions. It could be you even applying for a job and you're in front of your hiring manager. And now you got to talk about your unique value proposition. You got to do your homework. You got to do that first impression. You got to speak their language. There's so many application to sales. It's not just carrying a bag. It's living. It's how we live our life. How are we influencing others with things that we believe in, with a good intent and motives?
Excellent advice for everyone. And to close out, you can't go to college to get a sales degree, so I recommend you read the book. And even if you only implement 30% of what Rana's telling us, I think you'll be a lot further. Or for a lot of us, it's affirming. It's, yes, that's, I'm doing that. I'm doing, these sorts of things. And there's some extra ones. By the way, when I went through it, I went and changed my profile on LinkedIn too, by the way.
Yes, that's what I want to hear. And please, and that's a good point. Your viewers, your listeners, connect with me on LinkedIn, mention Rob's wonderful podcast, and let's connect. Let's learn from one another. I think each one of us have a gift that of teaching one another something that we don't know, and every person has that gift. So I look forward to learning from your team, from your listeners, and one more thing before I end it. When I started selling, there wasn't a lot of organizations colleges that were teaching sales. Now what we're seeing is that there are programs in the United States that are coming up and that are really bringing up these conversations early on. And so I see there's been an evolution in the way academia is looking at sales, and there are colleges that I also volunteer, and you're going to see me volunteering in the next few days there, that are doing some great things in teaching their enabling these youngsters to be much better in selling than I was when I started.
That's great learning. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom, your experience. And again, please, folks, go out and read the book. Thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you, Rob. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.